world will tell you to hoard and keep and store up in as much as you can, and that's where safety comes from, and that's where wealth accumulation comes from. In God's economy, He will tell you the path to blessing and a flourishing life, and probably even a flourishing business, is to actually think the opposite, and that is to be generous and to think about the kingdom and let resources flow through you, not get trapped and stuck on you.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Vertical Business Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to give out of your business. Pretty simple. But the reason we want to talk about this is we have observed as of recent, especially our church has a giving initiative going on, and we're talking to lots of guys that have businesses. And it's really cool to see the fact that people are thinking about it and they want to use their business to give. But the question we're getting asked a lot is like, how do I even get started? So we're wanting to record because we're essentially seeing that people don't know how to give out of their business. They want to, and they just don't have the answer. And so we feel we've got some thoughts that'll be helpful. How you doing today, dude?
Good. Doing really good. Yeah. It has been really interesting. I think for some people, this topic will be sort of like, well, yeah, I get it, and I already got it. And for some people, it'll be like, okay, that's really helpful. And I think the majority of people, as you pointed out, are just a little confused about the mechanics of giving out of my business, or should I give out of my business? Is it irresponsible? And so it is interesting how it's not necessarily intuitive to a lot of people, because we're wired to see the business as just simply an income generating entity and a place to protect, protect the mothership. And so the idea of like tapping into that entity to give, I think, is sort of confusing for some people. And they start thinking about tax ramifications or just business survivability. Lots of things I think go into people's heads, or, I should have a lot of cash on hand, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And none of those are bad thoughts, but it does plays into this thing where guys get frozen, and then they default to look at their personal finances, of which are typically a lot smaller.
Yeah.
They look to as to the resource or the source of where they can give from.
Yeah. Well, it seems funny how many guys that do have businesses have never thought about the fact that they could use their business for giving. I mean, just to go back to state the obvious, it's like one of the reasons people don't. One of the reasons people struggle with this is like it never even comes to mind unless somebody else has told them or they've seen an example of somebody they know that's doing that with their business.
Yep.
Like for me, I had you, but I don't know that I would have like immediately thought about that, even though I want to be generous and I want to give.
Right.
I might have not even thought about it. So that question of it being irresponsible.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I just had an example on that. I was talking to a guy the other day in the morning, and I just got done doing a Stronger Man thing and talking about business for the kingdom. And he came up to me, and he has a contracting company and has done exceptionally well per him, and has made a lot of money to the point where he said, I don't really need any more money. And it's like, okay, I'm assuming that's a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
And he pays himself, doesn't sound like he pays himself that much. So he's got this exact scenario we're talking about that we experience regularly. And so his personal side, he's like, gosh, I don't know how much I can give out of my personal side, but I have all this money in my business. This is interesting to me. And so
it's like this first moment where it like all clicks.
Yeah. And I take it. There's maybe 7 digits there in that business bank account. By the way he was talking.
Yeah.
And it was like, and he's like, so kind of like looking for validation. Like, can I give out of that? Should I give out of that? How do I do this?
Like, is this what you're talking about?
Yeah. So just to your point,
Yeah.
it really is interesting how that's sort of disconnected in people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so yeah, like that's a good segue into what I was saying. But like for the people that have never thought about it before, one of the first questions they might think about when they first do hear of an example or they hear about this concept of giving out of their business and can I do that? And how do I do that? Might be, is it responsible for me personally to do that in my business? What would you say to somebody that is questioning whether it is the responsible thing to do? Because that's that is a valid question.
Yeah, it is a very valid question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, our answer on this is, it comes down to a very large dichotomy or split between the way the world views finances and the way God views finances. Mm-hmm. The world will tell you to hoard and keep and store up in as much as you can, and that's where safety comes from, and that's where wealth accumulation comes from. Mm-hmm. In God's economy, He will tell you the path to blessing and a flourishing life, and probably even a flourishing business, is to actually think the opposite, and that is to be generous and to think about the kingdom and let resources flow through you, not get trapped and stuck on you. So our belief is that it's not irresponsible, that it's actually God's design for your assets, for the things He's given you, is to actually let them flow through you. And that includes your business. That's not just your personal finances. Your business is an asset that God has given you, and all of your assets should be available to the kingdom. And so it's not irresponsible. Now, with that said, it's like the old prayer, Lord, give us travel mercies, and then you go lay in the freeway. Like you can't be an idiot, right? Like if you have $200,000 in your business bank account and you go stroke a check for $1 million to your church, I don't know what God's going to do about that.
Yeah.
It
might deliver, but
it might deliver. He might actually. I mean, it's possible,
but felt like it was from Him.
Yeah.
But.
And so I have always said that I believe that responsible giving it lies at the intersection of wisdom and faith. Mm-hmm. There's a point there where wisdom and faith intersect, and you use your mind. And we've talked about the parable of being shrewd, like the shrewd manager.
Yep.
Being shrewd, being smart, being wise, and then exercising faith. And where those two intersect is a great place to consider your giving amount, because you're taking in account wisdom and reality of your business and the needs of your business, but then exercising an element of faith by go ahead and giving in an amount that you feel the Lord gives you, and an amount that looks like has a mix of those.
Well, that's probably also a good segue into the other thing we said seems to be what keeps people from giving or knowing how to give is not having a plan. It seems like having a plan is an actionable way to find that intersection of wisdom and faith. Because if you're going to come up with a good plan, then you're probably going to want to arrive there through logic and also prayer and talking with your wife and people you trust to speak into it. So developing a plan about how am I going to give, how much am I going to give, when am I going to give. These types of things are all helpful to give you a filter, and then it makes it a little easier to understand where that intersection occurs.
Yeah.
So to the meat of the episode, that's what we wanted to talk about. For starters, great breakdown of why it is not irresponsible. You have the okay from the ultimate authority.
Yeah.
And it's not irresponsible. We're doing it. Lots of business owners have done it. We know guys that have asked that very question and have converted their business. So it's not like you need to be doing it from the very beginning for it to be responsible.
Yeah, for sure.
You can do it.
Thanks for putting a bow on that, because we didn't quite tie that up. But just to say what you just said, no, it's not irresponsible if it's done with wisdom and faith. And it actually is God's plan to use the resources that He's given you to give. So that's we didn't quite cap that, but
Well, that's because I ran away with it to talk about the plan.
well, plans are good.
Yeah,
Plans help it not be irresponsible.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some principles then for people as they're thinking about doing this in their business. One is to just repeat ourselves for the 100th time on plan. Create a plan. To help make that go smoothly, you need to involve necessary team members. And then lastly, you need to stay consistent.
Yes.
Because I can speak to this with my company, Vet Hero. I started into business, I started business solely because I wanted to give out of my business.
Yep.
That was like the reason for even getting into it in the first place. And even then, and even with your example, being like really easily accessible for me, I still set out to give with Vet Hero. I even created sort of a plan for it, but I didn't stay consistent for a while. And so some of the things we're going to break down are what have ultimately allowed me or like equipped me and Vet Hero to be able to start giving consistently. And we are doing that now. And so this stuff is really helpful.
Well, dude, I just want to put some color on that. I don't know how much further you're going to go with that, but I want to make sure, and I want to expand on that a little bit, because I actually think that what you just said, it might even be, I mean, we'll get to some of the principles and the how-tos, but what you just said probably at its core is one of the primary reasons people don't give out of their business.
Yep.
Because it's just that hey, I want to give out of my business. And then the phone instantly rings and it's a customer problem.
Exactly.
Hey, I want to give out of my business on a Sunday after they hear something about generosity. And then they go to work and they just get punched in the face with all the problems that come with owning a business.
Yeah, man.
And then it just doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen. And then there's maybe some confusion, and it's just like the fog of war of business. It just never happens.
Well, how many good things in your life do you set out to do and then you don't
Totally.
do? I mean, this is the secret to a lot of things, but
Right.
giving being the meta point of this episode. But like, yeah, dude, you do the same thing with working out. You make the New
Yes.
Year's resolution, and then
Right.
and then you just go to the gym every 3 days, and then it's every 5 days, and then that's what's happening with me at Vet Hero. You know, I set out to give. I immediately stroked a check, and then I'm like, okay, and then I set a reminder on my calendar. Well, it was like 3 months later. I'm like, oh crap, I forgot to write that check. So
yeah, that is what happens. And so I love, your points there. It's like, make a plan, involve your team.
yeah.
Involve your team, and then commit to staying consistent. And involving your team, I think, is one of the biggest things. It's just like if you put it on bill pay, get your bookkeeper to like get it going on bill pay. If you're just going to do a specific amount, or just give her instructions, get it into someone else's head on your team. If you have that team member,
Yep.
get it into their head. Get other people saying, hey, we need it, get it into your systems. And if it is you, just in you alone, probably one of the best things you can do is just schedule a bill pay.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean,
with your bank.
Yeah, well, ironically, it's like that's what I've done with my personal finances for giving, and I think that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah,
and so it obviously and totally translates to your business.
Yeah.
So to be able to create a plan and to be able to involve your team members, some of the meat like we've been talking about that's in here, the way that you're going to be able to effectively do those things is, and this also plays into being wise and responsible with how you're giving, and to allow to wrestle with like working through it with the Lord is, and you've said this to me a ton of times, so I know you agree, but it's like you got to know your business. And this is also part of our observation, I think, with a lot of the guys that we've spoken with that are like amazingly, they're bought in and they want to give and they want to do something bigger with their asset. And then we're like immediately go to, yeah, that's great. Well, we give out of our profits. Do you have X, Y, or Z number from your P&L? What? Oh, do you even know what a P&L is? Well, not really. It's like, it's funny how many guys are out of touch with this. So it's super important to, you got to know your business to run an effective business, to be a responsible business owner. I mean, that's a separate topic. We would obviously advise owners of businesses. It's typical for founders to like not specialize in that area. And so we would highly recommend you focus on that for other purposes and other goals with your business, but it's just as important for being able to figure out how to give.
Dude, that's so well said.
Yeah.
It is such a good point. I mean, literally 4 out of the last 6 guys I've talked to about their business, this is not an exaggeration, could not tell me either how to get to their P&L, whether they had a P&L, or what their P&L said at the end of the month.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you. And so, and that is not a slam on guys that...
No, yeah, we're not laughing at you.
But it's just your encouragement to know your business is absolutely valid. Every resource God gives us, we need to steward.
That's really well said.
Right? Yeah, we need to steward the resources God gives us, and part of stewarding the asset of your business is to know it,
yes,
and to run it well and run it with quality and effectiveness unto the Lord. And part of that is just being a good businessman, is knowing your finances. Mm-hmm. And so when there is a call to give, you can go, I know exactly where I'm at. I know exactly what I can give. But literally, just the other day, I mean, in the last 6 conversations I've had, in fact, this business that you and I are acquiring, one of the businesses we're looking at acquiring here, he literally doesn't know his profitability. And I'm talking on an annual basis or a monthly basis. So know your business. So great. That's a great point. I just wanted to dovetail that.
Dude, totally. Well, okay. So we actually have a lot of points under this. So I'm going to try to speed through them a little bit for you guys so that you can have them and you can use them. But the other thing to make it easier for you is to have a framework for your plan, and to make it easier for your team members to implement with you, and then to stay consistent. So this supports all of our principles, is to use, we would recommend first and foremost, because literally we've named it the Sparrow Way, because we believe in it so much. We would recommend using the Sparrow Way, and we have an episode on that. We've got stuff online about how to actually implement it, but just like at a very high level, it's a system for doing your books that makes it a lot easier for you to reliably identify what you're going to use for OPEX, and then what your profit's going to be. And then in the Sparrow Way, we've added on top of kind of another idea, and we've added a giving account. So yeah, and I would
recommend, guys, honestly, like Caleb wrote a blog on this. It was exceptional. It was it really unpacked it nicely. We did do an episode on it, but I actually think your blog post is probably the most helpful resource on actually setting this up and getting your mind around it. So
yeah,
I mean, watch the video too, but it might help. Might be some color there, but the blog is excellent.
The blog,
which is at our website, which is gosparrow.com, GOSPEIRO.com. It's out there.
Yep.
Yep,
that's good. Totally. So that's something else we'd recommend. Get a good system in place, and that's one we would recommend. That's a good one. The other option, if the Sparrow Way is confusing, or for whatever reason you just decide that that's not for you, a way you could start doing it, or you could start doing this immediately, that's similar to the Sparrow Way system, just maybe a little less complex, is to pull your P&L. So this plays into knowing your business. You got to start there, right? Because then you got to know what your P&L says. But you can pull your P&L, and you can just give a percentage of your profits, which again, that's kind of what the Sparrow Way helps you. That's at a high level. That's what it's doing, or what it helps you do, kind of on autopilot. This would be more of a manual way. You could just commit to a percentage. Make a plan. Hey, I know I'm moving forward. I'm going to give 10% of my profits.
Right. And in this model, it's like you can just get your bookkeeper or whoever you have doing your bookkeeping for you. Tell them you want to report on the 5th of every, or maybe the 10th of every month after your P&L has settled.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them you want a report, and you just do a quick calculation of like whatever it says at the bottom. Hopefully it's positive. If it's not, then you have to decide what you're going to do.
Yes.
But if it's a positive number, you just know. You say we're always going to give 10% of profits. It's just a really simple, as you said, more manual way of just like, hey, bookkeeper, send me my P&L, quick calculator. Okay, we made $10,000 last month. We're going to give $1,000.
Yep.
And you fire back to your bookkeeper or whatever. And anyway, it's just kind of a manual method.
Yep, that's good. That's a good explanation. So then another way that I can touch on pretty well because of Vet Hero is you can still, speaking to the is it responsible again question, you can responsibly give out of your business even if it's not profitable. And so another way to think about this is to just commit to to an amount you're going to give monthly or annually, and you make that commitment, and then you just give that amount no matter what. And this would be a scenario like you talked about where you could just put that on bill pay. Like, hey, I'm going to give $100 every month, and I put that on bill pay, and I just know that's what's going out. And the reason I referenced Vet Hero is because it's a SaaS company, and not that you can't be profitable as a SaaS company, but if you're running a growth model, or there might be many reasons that you're not profitable every month, or you're just not profitable at all yet, you can still give. And in that case, it might just be easier to pick an exact amount and give it every month.
Yeah. And I actually really love that when business owners do that. And we've touched on this on other episodes. Even if you're not profitable, you might say, how in the world can I give if I'm not profitable? Well, you do because you do. And it's just, and you're driving a stake in the ground, and you're just saying, even if it's just symbolically, even if it's $1, and I'm not kidding, even if it's just $1.
Yeah, dude. I love that. You've said that to me, and that's inspiring.
Yeah. It's like, it's a commitment to the Lord. It's symbolic. It's a stake in the ground that says, Jesus, this business is yours, and we're going to give out of it, even if it's $1. And Lord, you can increase this if you want to, and we'll increase it as you allow, and we'll be faithful to increase it. And so absolutely you can just give, and you can just say, hey, we're not profitable, but we're going to symbolically give something. And sometimes
that's
it can be a lot.
Cool, dude. Plant the flag.
Yeah. Plant the flag and just be like, Lord, we're going to give, and we obviously, as we said in the beginning of the episode, we believe that the Lord is looking for givers. He's looking across his globe, and he's looking for people with generous hearts to funnel more resources through. Mm-hmm. And we believe that if you commit your business to that, there's a good chance God will continue to give you more resources so that you can do more giving. So anyway, yeah, just a flat number.
Love that. Okay, quickly, the last one, if you're somebody who has like a seasonal business, like maybe a farmer as an example,
yep.
Don't think that this doesn't apply to you, because maybe an easier way to do this for somebody who's in that position, we've thought of, or we've advised people on the fact that, well, you don't have to give monthly. You could commit to a lump sum at some point in the year and just give that way. So it can be done that way too. And no, there's not any disadvantage to doing it that way from a tax perspective, or
right.
The logistics of giving out of your business can sometimes seem scary. It's just as easy to do it that way as it is to give monthly. Yep. Again, the Sparrow Way, by the way, would make that a lot easier. Go look into that. I won't get into why, but it would.
Yeah.
So, kind of the last thing under our principles category that we wanted to touch on. That's also an observation as we talk to these guys, and you kind of mentioned it with the contractor, but there's a lot of guys that seem to have cash trapped in their business. And I don't know what that's due to, what that is, if it's like a misunderstanding about what's responsible to have in your back pocket or in your savings account for your business come a rainy day. Some of it it's going to come down to faith, but we have a pretty tangible rule that we've applied to our businesses that you taught me that I think is a helpful lens for, oh man, how much cash do I need to hold on to? But yeah, a lot of guys have cash stuck in their businesses.
Yeah.
So that rule is that I'm referencing is the 90-day rule that you've described to me.
Yeah.
And could you speak a little bit? I mean, you've said
Yeah.
in the past, also the 90-day rule is flexible if you're like consistently profitable. So
Yeah.
I'd love to just hear your
Certainly.
quick thoughts on that.
Certainly is. I mean, and this is, this is not this isn't groundbreaking budgeting or finance rule, but I think Dave Ramsey talks about it with personal finance, and certainly it applies to business. But if you look at the course of business and seasonality and potential economic factors, things like that, if you keep 90 days worth of operating capital in your company, that is typically more than enough. That's a very responsible place to be. So you could have a total business outage for 90 days and you would still have enough capital to keep employees paid and the lights on and everything going. And so if you've reached that place where you have 90 days operating capital, you really should do something else with that cash.
Yeah.
Either buy
that
another
sounds
business.
extreme. It's like,
right. It's like,
my business didn't do anything for 90 days. It would still be funded.
Right.
That's extreme.
Right. And so even if you had a 10% loss, a 10% loss in profit, or a 20%, I mean, that's just a little notch out of your operating capital, let alone 90 days at 100% loss.
Right.
And so that's a very responsible place to be, very responsible place to be. So if you've exceeded that, you started getting into the 180 day, 210 day of operating capital, you're basically just sitting on cash, and cash is not a good investment. The cash is not a good asset just on its own. You should do something with that.
And quickly, how would a guy know what if he was somebody who had a cash trapped in his business and he also falls under the doesn't really know his business category?
Yeah.
How would somebody figure out exactly what their operating capital
Well, that's a really good question.
number is?
Yeah, that's excellent. So you would have your bookkeeper or yourself pull your profit and loss, sometimes called an income and expense statement,
Yep.
for a particular month. Probably the best way to get a gauge of this is to look at your last 3 months and go to the category that's called expenses, because any P&L is going to have an income section. It's going to have a cost of goods sold section below that. And then below that are your what they call your G&A, like your general and admin expenses. This is not your cost of goods sold. So if you're a builder, this is not the cost of the lumber. This is your expenses, payroll. This is your hard expenses that it takes to operate the business, not to build your product, to operate your business. It's your payroll, to keep the lights on, it's your internet, it's your rent, all those things that you have to pay. There's going to be a subtotal under that, under expenses, and it's going to have a number. That is your operating. That's what you need to make sure you have 3 times that in the bank. So if you look at your last 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. I'm not listening to this guy anymore. He can't talk. The last 3 months, and then divide that by 3. That's your, or take that sum and say, well, that's 90 days worth, and that's the amount you need to have in the bank. So the principle here is, the illustration, or whatever we want to call it, that the outcome of what we're talking about is if you're sitting on more cash, then you have resources available to you to be generous. You should really consider deploying that capital to the kingdom. And not just the kingdom. Obviously, you're not just going to spend every ounce of cash above 90 days. But if you have that, you should start thinking about and looking for kingdom efforts. Talk to your pastor. Look for initiatives, even parachurch ministries. Start thinking about, how can I use this extra capital? And by the way, if you are profitable, you could probably get away, if you have a nice, confident business, you're profitable month to month, you could probably get away with 60 days operating capital, because your bank account's always going up.
Right.
Because you're like, hey, I stacked another 30 grand in the bank account this month because we're that profitable. So anyway, so think about using those dollars for the kingdom. And that's where a lot of guys we talk to they're confused on that. They have all this money stuck in their business bank account thinking it's their retirement or whatever. It's not a great way to view your business bank account.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well said.
Yeah. So, dude, I can't help but thinking about, just some examples of like, I mean, I have guys going through my head right now that have experienced this, and like, on getting through this trepidation or the confusion around giving out of your business. And, one example is a really good friend of ours, and he's a contractor, and he always did okay, with his business, but it was at times hit and miss, and there's some seasonality there, some economic factors there, but it's been really interesting to watch his journey. And he got saved, and I mean, marriage on the rocks, all the stuff, right?
Yep.
And he and his wife have both gotten saved. Just this incredible story of a guy who just has now just embraced Jesus, and he's just loves the Lord. And if you talk to him, you can't bump into him without Jesus coming out of his mouth,
Yeah.
And actually choked me up a little
smile
bit
on my
talking about
face.
it.
Yeah.
Just like, man. It's so cool. And he has caught on to this business, doing business for the kingdom. And it has just been incredible to watch him. The lights go on, and the seeing the resources he has, because he has a nice business, and watching him be able to give and in the tune of 6 digits now, as he's exercised that muscle of giving, then the muscle's getting bigger, and he's getting better at it, and the Lord is genuinely blessing his company because he's letting things flow through him.
Yep.
And I mean, he is now just admittedly, I mean, like, not admittedly, but like, wow, his business is booming, and he's giving, and he's now started an entire other construction company specifically to build and sell homes and to develop land and properties, with pretty much 100% of the profits, close to it, going to the kingdom. And
That's so
talking,
cool.
It's making an impact, huge impact. So it really is cool to watch this whole thing work. So if you can get your mind around it, know your business, commit to it, and really consider using your business to give to the kingdom.
Yeah. And if you feel like the twinge, if you feel like this is of interest to you, then there's a good chance that the Lord is telling you, you're feeling that conviction for a reason, that this is what you should be doing. And so if you're feeling that, then maybe you should do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for your interest in the Vertical Business Podcast. If you like what you heard today, or you're just interested in all things business, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on bell notifications so you know when we're posting. We're typically posting 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you never know when we might not drop a short or something impromptu. And in addition to on YouTube here, you can also follow us or find us on Spotify as well as Apple Music, where we post our episodes as well. And then lastly, if you want to engage with us outside of the podcast, you can find us on our website at gosparrow.com. That is where you can subscribe to our newsletter and get access to our other content outside of the Vertical Business Podcast. So we're looking forward to seeing you there.